Welcome to another episode of the Offer Letter Candidate Spotlight, the series that is all about giving job seekers the space to talk about their own experience in their own words beyond their resume and their job title. Today, I am joined with Roger Fleenor. Roger, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian. Hello, hello. Hello from Florida. Thanks for having me.
And so, Roger, for anybody who's meeting you for the first time, can you just give them a quick background pitch of who you are, what problems you solve, and a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a fun little story I do like to share. It's pretty unique, pretty unconventional, but about 10 years ago, fresh out of high school, I had a small data entry job at an auto parts company store. And I figured out I could automate the entire data entry process with some Python scripts. So I immediately started working as a software engineer fresh out of high school. Yeah, ever since then, that catapulted the rest of my career. It's kind of interesting. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was just naturally thrown in that direction ever since. I've worked at some large enterprises in the automotive technology sector, some small startups. And I've also taught at a few different universities for computer science and data science fundamentals. There is also a handful of startups I've created and crashed and burned, unfortunately, but I did eventually find some success. So maybe I'll share a little bit about that. But yeah, I do have a successful running company, kind of on the sidelines as a side project. But I am a full stack engineer natively. I love what I do. I love solving problems. Feels like I'm playing a video game and I'm getting paid for it. So that's one of the things I really love. JavaScript, Python are my go-to. In recent years, I've had a very heavy focus in AI integration. It's a pretty big trending topic nowadays. But that's a little bit about me.
So quickly, let's talk quickly about your lecturing and your teaching. Did you always want to teach? Did this just kind of happen? Like what? How did that happen? How'd you get your start in there?
So it's pretty interesting, but good majority of my family members actually are teachers also. So maybe it's just a natural genetic thing to be inclined to this. But I love mentoring. I love guiding people. I love helping and taking someone from a place that's lost to having confidence and start to see where they're going. I often reflect about when I didn't know something or I didn't know how to access a resource, how frustrating or lost I felt. But having that guidance and then being that person to give someone that guidance is very fulfilling.
And with teaching, did you find that a lot of times you would have to bring a lot of those skills into your professional day to day as well? Because you're consistently working with people who, like myself, who are not technical, or somebody who is much more junior to you that is trying to learn. So do you find that also helped you in your professional career?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. There's been many outstanding projects where I've worked on where I stepped up from just being a individual contributor to taking on a lead or mentoring or coaching other engineers. So yeah, it definitely contributed to the mentorship quality. Also, the communication aspect's pretty big also. I did notice after spending more time teaching that I became more communicative and understood how to keep everyone in the loop versus just kind of operating in my own silo, kind of behind closed doors type of thing, especially when being remote. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I can only imagine though, as a teacher, all the different ways that you learn to communicate with people, right? Because it's not just the same way that like I might learn a different way and I might want to hear a different way than the person sitting next to me. So kind of fascinating to bring some of those knowledges to the professional work as well.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. It is pretty interesting. But, many of the students I've had in the past, they were either transitioning from other careers or disciplines. One guy was a retired surgeon. He just wanted to learn coding for fun, basically. So that was pretty interesting. He had some pretty cool stories about all the lives he saved. On the other side, there's stay-at-home moms who've been out of work for 10 years, and so they're trying to crack into a new industry. So, yeah, what you're saying is definitely very relevant.
Yeah, I would only imagine the different people that you get walking in through a classroom door. That's kind of fascinating in a sense. And then let's talk a little bit quickly just on some of your startup work. Were some of these passion projects? How did you get some of your ideas? Where did you get some of the creativity to go about some of that?
Yeah, of course. So since I was young, I always really loved to play video games, and I felt like life in general is also somewhat of a video game because you can either set goals or create missions and accomplish things. And you could also fail, or you could lose things. Even managing your finances could be a bit of a game too, you know. Some people are out of control with their spending, other people are more modest, as an example. But yeah, this was kind of fun for me. So coming up with a business idea, trying to figure out if it works, you know, throwing, you know, what sticks at a wall, you know, experimenting was also a very fun process for me. Again, also just kind of like playing a video game. And yeah, ever since I was young, I would try to sell or resell Pokemon cards, video games, things like that. I mowed lawns. I started a small little lawn care business. Some of these things, you know, they, you know, weren't amazing, but it proved to me something like if you have an idea and you know, experiment, you can make it work. So yeah, through college, I had a few different startup ideas. One of them was a tutoring dashboarding platform for schools. Another one was something that me and a few other partners pitched to in Y Combinator, which was a advertisement signage that you could use to advertise on vehicles such as rideshare, Uber, or Lyft.
That's cool.
So this is actually another startup. You know, they came out with the idea and
Yeah.
they scaled and got rapid adoption very quickly. So it is pretty common out in New York. We, of course, were very small. I was fresh out of school and I didn't really have too much technical know-how to actually like get it off the ground, you know, and even create an MVP to pitch it. But that was another example that failed. I
But even
succeeding.
at that point, though, like even though at that point, like all the knowledge that you learned, even just what you were just saying, like you didn't know at some point some of the things that you didn't know, right? And so, I mean, now, like, yeah, I think you were about to transition to something that was more successful, but just everything is just always about learning and developing of what you're trying to grow.
Yeah, that's correct. I would say there's kind of a graph, like an opportunity and then success. They eventually intersect, you know, with enough failures and enough, you know, trial and error. So yeah, you're very right. Yeah, I definitely did learn like how to do marketing, things like that. Um, yeah, my startup that I'm working on now is it's pretty stable and independent. So there's a company that recently went bankrupt. It is called Sonder. It is very similar to like Airbnb, except they own their own properties.
Okay.
So they had massive funding. They're very successful, and they ran into some issues, however, where they grew too fast. They started acquiring properties they couldn't afford, and they thought, you know, they'd make the money back. Some economic shifts happened, and so yeah, they just kind of fell apart financially. But yeah, our concept is very similar, and that's where we own our own properties, we own our own tech, we own our software. Our target niche is traveling professionals. So Airbnb you can kind of think of as like more vacation, kind of like,
Hmm.
you know, party type of vibes. We specifically cater to probably like shorter or longer term stays for traveling professionals. Some of the unique characteristics of our properties are they are sound isolated, bug proof, packed with AI, technological enhancements, security cameras, very quick and easy, immediate to booking and checking out process. A lot of our clients actually, they are booked automatically through their staffing agency. So if a nurse wants to work a 3-month contract near a hospital, the recruiter will actually just book her stay through us
That's
automatically.
awesome.
Yeah, we're kind of like an Airbnb, kind of like a Sonder, but our specific demographic is traveling professionals. Sonder was kind of a bit more in that market than Airbnb. We start off with one property just to test the flow, how it's going. We have 5 now, and we 100% own and control everything. So there's no risk of, you know, pandemic 2.0 knocking us out or anything so far. So it's going fine so far. It's stable. We'll see what happens, but
That's actually a really cool idea to with especially with traveling professionals that are like you said, like a nurse that is traveling to a new hospital or a new region, or potentially I'm working with relocation companies, right? Where people are relocating for a job and need a temporary place to stay and don't want to go looking for something. It's a really interesting concept that you've come up with there.
yep, exactly. Yep, definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your early career. You talked a little bit about kind of how you started at an automotive parts manufacturer, parts company, and went from a data engineer. I'm sorry, you said more of like a data entry role into more of a programming role. Talk us about how you figured out some of that out. What was going through your headspace at the time when you're like, hey, I can just automate this.
Yeah. So for me, it was at one point, it was pretty cool. Like, okay, yeah, I have a computer job. You know, back when I was younger, um, the difference between like blue collar work and white collar work was like pretty apparent. And it's like, you were pretty esteemed, you know, if you were working at a computer, you know, even if you were just sending emails or anything. But it was cool for a while, right? But eventually that excitement dies out. And I felt like it was so monotonous, so tedious. And so I was kind of looking for ways to like make this better or make it faster. And yeah, I think that's just like a natural characteristic of mine to keep improving, keep looking for, that new 1% to improve or make more efficient. So yeah, it was just a really redundant process. Like I felt like I was burning my mind, just the same clicking buttons, copy and paste over and over and over again. But yeah, just with some Googling, I figured out about Python, and yeah, I was honestly, I was just literally um, not doing much different than what I was doing in the data entry role, which was just copying and pasting scripts from Google. But yeah, eventually I figured out how to make it work. Uh, Showed it to the manager. They were impressed. They're like, "Hey, can you do this everywhere?" And so yeah, took off from there.
And so was this at Benzene Auto Parts?
That's correct. Yeah,
So it's fascinating to me because you went from potentially just and I hate to say just a data entry position, but you've kind of just started to develop your own role there as well.
exactly. Yeah, very true. Over time, also, I got exposure and started working on various other technical aspects in the company, such as mobile app, web, backend, database, and vice versa. But yeah, I got pretty good exposure to various areas there. Almost kind of just creating my own, I guess, role or work, as I was going basically.
I mean, and then also it seems like you're able to, hey, this process can be improved with some technical work here too, and right, like you get to touch so many different parts in the business as well. So, how big was the scope of the company at the time you were there? Like, kind of, can you give us some of the details there?
Yeah, so this was a very tiny kind of like mom and pop brick and mortar shop. So I believe the owner, he was a finance executive, and then he purchased an old auto recycling yard. And this guy actually is a very big mentor and influence to me. He inspired me to really start looking into a lot of things that became into my career. So I give him a lot of credits and kudos for those things. But yeah, he basically wanted to give a very enterprise spin-off, to a very old and outdated industry. So yeah, he actually grew that company to be very big and very corporate level, kind of like used auto parts type of effect.
Um, what would you say like some of the your biggest kind of accomplishments while you were there would have been?
Biggest accomplishments is honing into some major pain points, things that basically affected bottom line dollar amounts. So I mean, it's one thing to say like, hey, yeah, this is going to improve it. But if you can create like some type of demo or some type of MVP that shows like, okay, yeah, this is faster. This reduces, a lot of time spent. That was the main thing that I just consistently showcased in various avenues of the business that could be improved.
So, what kind of metrics would you try to show, or what type of business cases were you trying to sell there? Where is it always just speed and reliability and making sure that inventory wasn't lost, or what was some of the things that you were trying to accomplish there?
Yeah. So one example is they do have a handful of third-party softwares and tools, utilities type of thing. A lot of this is fine and it works, right? But due to the, how would you say, multiple loose ends that are tied together, there is opportunities for lost data, very slow imports and export times. So if you could remove all of these and create one, all-in-one solution, you really, lose a lot of those loose ends. So one example is they had a camera station for photographing auto parts. Then they had a separate computer for scanning the barcode on the parts, and then they would manually enter some data. And then in a third step, they would move the part to a location and scan it into that physical location. So all of this is like three very manual steps that could literally all be consolidated to a single mobile app. Mobile app on a phone has access to the camera. So that removes the physical need for a separate webcam, basically. You can just upload some data via field to an API onto the server. Immediately, it'll update the record for that part. And then lastly, storing the parts. You don't actually need to physically bring the part to the location to scan that it was there. If you know where it's supposed to go, it can automatically not require physical data entry for the location it needs to be stored, and you just automatically assign it. Yeah, that was one very, very big major solution that solved a lot of things. Fast forward many years up until now, they have rebuilt their own proprietary, ground up, like very elegant, like enterprise level solution for that. Yeah, my experiment there, was enough to kick that into the right direction, I suppose.
And I mean, just from that kind of standpoint too, like just not having the data entry aspect there, and like there's a place where one person could accidentally put a one instead of a two, right? And it messes up inventory, or you think it's at one location and it's actually not there. It still hasn't been out in transit, right? And there's just so much information that always goes out. And like if you're in three different systems, even if you have a report that reports out nightly, right? Like that's nightly. That could be potentially 12 hours when something left your location, right? And you just don't know where it's at. It's
Exactly.
it's it's a really fascinating problem that people are solving with more of these enterprise kind of systems.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so you ended up going over to Cox Automotive. When I was looking over your resume, you worked with some really major brands while you were over there. You also replaced some legacy systems as well. What did projects like that require from you technically and as well as politically as well in dealing with companies like that?
So in very large enterprises, there's multiple levels, multiple chains of approval and refinement for a lot of work that gets passed down the pipeline. Being a charismatic or charming person is a pretty big part of it. When people can relate a face, to a piece of work that's happening, it really starts to bring in, especially for someone who's at like the director level or management level who has, like 20 people under them. It helps to like start building a profile of one person, in the back of their mind. So if they get a unique project, they have an idea of like where you want to go in your career, they can start, passing those opportunities to you. So yeah, part of that also is just developing a good relationship with people and being accountable. And yeah, I think that's probably a good answer to that question.
And you also architected a data warehouse that handled about 250 terabytes of data per month. And then you also reduced storage costs by 70%. What were some of the key decisions that made that possible?
Just for a little bit of context, Cox Automotive is a major conglomerate. They own tons and tons of smaller companies, all packaged together. Kelly Blue Book and AutoTrader exclusively are the two apps that I represented and maintained and supported. There is tons and tons of backend infrastructure that is actually the same for these various
I did
different
not know that.
business identities. So on the front end, you will see Kelly Blue Book, you'll see AutoTrader, you also see Manheim for auctions, and there's so many other services. But yeah, behind the scenes, it's all the same thing, which is crazy. They just keep, buying more companies and just absorbing it into their ecosystem. They quite honestly do have a very massive monopoly over the entire like vehicle life cycle, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, to give more context on what you're asking about, there's very heavy traffic that comes in from the amount of attention and user interaction they have in the web app, mobile app. There is also enterprise level, corp to corp app functionality that's also separate from public or a B2C functionality. The B2C is business to consumer apps are very, very traffic heavy. So needing to think about providing a really good experience to the customer, even though millions of people are accessing it all at the same time, is pretty important. So there's some interesting design concepts to consider, like rate limiting, scalability, sharding, replicas, those type of things that come to mind when you're architecting a system like that, so that it's fault tolerant, has very high uptime. Yeah, all of those are things that happen behind the scenes that ultimately give a really seamless, efficient experience to the user, who is often one, out of a million on the site at any one particular time.
Yeah, it's crazy. I never thought that all those companies were basically owned by the same conglomerate, right? Like I get an email almost, I think it's monthly, about what my value for my car is, right? And then when I'm daydreaming about what I want for my next car, I'm on Auto Trader trying to figure out what that's going to cost me. So it's funny that it is full cycle on that sense.
Yep, exactly. Yep, that's absolutely right.
So, and then you've also reduced QA time by 95%, also at Cox with automated test framework. How did you get buy-in to help shift culture and as well as some more of the testing while you were there?
There was a lot of incidents that we had to just manually deal with, which was a major headache. You'd fix one test and then, okay, great, that works, but now 5 other tests on the other side are broken. So there was definitely a loss of fluidity here, and then just tons of time lost, troubleshooting these issues. So each team that we're assigned to, we have our own specific portion of the app that we often focus on. And sometimes our tests break their tests, and then their tests break our tests. So it was a massive headache, honestly. But I mean, these are, ongoing issues that people are aware about, but getting buy-in to fix these issues is ultimately being the, squeaky wheel gets the oil. There's a phrasing there. I brought it up so many times, and, it's one thing to be a pain point for me, but if I can accumulate how many hours and ultimately, money basically is being burnt on solving these issues that could really be resolved permanently. If we had one single, how would you say, consolidated plan for managing these test cases, yeah, we can definitely save a lot of time and energy, and then shift more focus to work that's more focused for products or clients, things that are truly, revenue generating. But yeah, ultimately figuring out a system for our test cases, such as test coverage, how granular the test cases need to be. Many of our test cases were simply just too specific and too dense, when we could really just have a single test for an entire class and then mock all of the data inputs and outputs for that class and then let it pass. That at some point was a major maintenance overhaul efforts that, eventually realized massive improvement.
And kind of moving on with some of your experience, you ended up going to Stella Automotive AI. Is that the first time you started to, and kind of on your, what it looked like is you started heavily working with LLMs and AI models at that time? Is that kind of when you started to start diving into that?
That's correct. Yeah. I believe at that time in the entire software engineering industry, everyone was just dialing into this whole AI trend. Like these buzzwords are just flying everywhere like crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're about the same age. And I just remember like all of us when we were kids were like, oh, I want to work on computers. Right. And I feel like as kids now are talking about AI, I feel like that's what like, we're going to just keep going in more buzzwords and a lot more, like, it's just going to even go down further for everybody kind of coming up right now. It's like AI and LLMs are just, I feel like we're just scratching the surface when we're talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. The crazy thing is like every couple of years, there's like these new, big things that are happening, like AI and ML, machine learning was pretty big. Very specifically, there were certain type of models or search or algorithmic patterns like random forest search, supervised, unsupervised learning. These type of things were pretty big. Honestly, I haven't heard a single thing about any of these in many years. And then LLMs literally copy and paste and run a model has taken off. So yeah, I'm pretty interested to see what else changes or becomes trending in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, PyTorch has made such an influence on all of the ML models, right? And then we'll see kind of what happens in the next couple of years as new models come up and new things keep evolving as well. I'm very curious to see what comes up. But at Stella,
Definitely.
you owned multiple backend systems that are connected to LLMs and AI models. What was the first real production challenge that you ran into integrating some of these into LLMs, into AI models?
So we definitely integrated AI in whatever vertical we could possibly imagine. Some things were very specifically proprietarily built by our in-house data science team. Some for very specific use cases were just we simply reused a existing pre-built model from Hugging Face or LangChain, and then very quickly just plug and play, let it run, put it behind an API, and let it do its thing. So yeah, we have a very easy case and a very complex case. Essentially, in this startup, we have built from scratch an entire data pipeline that would move tons of NLP semantically tagged audio calls and recordings. To give more context, the product is a digital voice assistant for car dealerships. So a customer would call in, they would say, hey, something's wrong with my car. The AI would figure out, okay, do they need to book an appointment? Do they need to send a mechanic out to come inspect the car? Can we send a tow truck? These type of things. Maybe it's not maintenance related. Maybe they want to get a quote for a car. Maybe they need a status update on where their car delivery is currently at. So yeah, all of this is basically analyzed and then semantically tagged through some NLP process, and then eventually it makes its way to our data pipeline, which aggregates the data, performs some bin decoding, and yeah, moves this data into the right places. Initially, the startup, we only had a few customers signed up and actively subscribing. So the throughput wasn't too crazy, but this thing simply just, it worked. It got a lot of attention. People liked it. And surprisingly, the AI was pretty human. So people actually didn't really notice that they were talking to a bot, until, much later. But this, once it started getting rapid popularity. We just got thousands of active subscribing dealerships to the platform. We had to deal with the scale of the volume coming through the pipeline. So once again, very similar to what I did at Cox, we had to handle that scalability very gracefully, and that was a major initiative to handle and figure out what to do with all of that. We certainly couldn't have a single chance at downtime, and so this did result in multiple sleepless nights trying to collaborate, some overlap between India time zones and China time zones, with some of the other colleagues I was working with. Yeah, it's definitely nice to have, coverage in those times so you can sleep. But yeah, that was a pretty interesting part of what we did there.
And you led data scientists and ML engineers for deployment there. What was the biggest disconnect you felt like from the ML and the data scientists?
So we do have some of the customers that we interact with directly, and to them, the AI ML stuff is kind of like buzzwords, and they think it's very like profitable stuff. Truthfully, in practice, some of it's a little kind of fancy vocabulary, and in some cases maybe doesn't translate exactly to what they think will happen. So there's oftentimes we'll have a customer, they'll have a pain point that they encounter or a new feature that they want on their dashboard or app or for their AI bot to do. And some things are not technically feasible, or, the AI doesn't exactly do what they thought it was. Being able to bridge that gap in basically communication, but still give them enough, I guess, watered down explanation so that they can understand what's happening. Because you could explain like how AI and ML works, and you could tell it to them 5-10 times and they still won't get it unless you have like a computer science degree or something. So yeah, that part's pretty important.
I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, AI can solve this problem or AI can solve this problem," but it's a lot of times it's not that simple, right? And it's a lot of you for AI models to work, and for this is coming from a layman's. I know there has to be data in there. I know there has to be information already in there, or it's going to start. You don't want it to hallucinate on a potential customer or somebody else. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I cannot completely empathize with trying to make sure that you're working with your clients and they understand exactly what you can provide them without trying to oversell them.
Yep, exactly.
Um, but from there, you ended up joining Uber to kind of help them with a project. And if I remember correctly, it was a 1099 in tax filing that you needed. What does the engineering look like for a project like that, where you do have IRS deadlines that you have to meet, and as well as you're working with another major company that also has strict guidance on what they want to provide?
Mhm. Yeah, so this is actually a very short-term contract. I was exclusively brought on board just as a consultant to help them meet those tax deadlines. But this system is actually very simple and not very complex. Surprisingly, I honestly I felt a little intimidated initially because I thought we were going to be working on some like really complex problems. And some people that are, well, at least those that are familiar with like the hacker rank and leak coding, challenges, they anticipate like that level of difficulty is what you'll be working on, on the job, so to speak. But no, it's actually very simple. A lot of what Uber has built is very stable, very mature, very elegant, enterprise level applications. There's, however, some things that are less priority, less revenue generating, but for compliance reasons or, regulatory reasons, they have to do it, for the IRS, so to speak. But yeah, this is just a very simple desktop tool that would extract data from a variety of different forms and fields that are exported from the driver side of the app, compile that and aggregate it into a specific text file format that the IRS is looking for. So it is quite literally reading text from a file and then writing text to another file. It is so simple, and surprisingly, it's I think the main thing is that while this is very simple, you have to do this for like millions and millions of drivers and millions of rides. So automating, what was previously a very manual process for a team of tax prep associates, was pretty impactful, despite how simple in nature the tech was.
That kind of surprised me because I was expecting it like to you, what you were saying. It would have seemed to me like a major project or crazy type of complex environment that you would have to go into, but it didn't seem like that at all for you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Was there anything from an IRS reporting standpoint that kind of surprised you, or was that all pretty straightforward?
So a lot of their documentation is, how do I describe this? It's a little messy.
We're in tax
It,
season. I get it.
and with the pressure to get things going pretty quickly, it just yeah, there's definitely some stress along with that. Trying to figure out and decipher what they interpreted and described something as, but it was also a pretty big part of it. So actually, part of the reason why Uber had searched for not only an English speaking but US based candidate, someone who's familiar with tax related things and terminology and developments, they actually offshored the entire team to Brazil, and they were all Spanish speaking. And so they actually didn't understand the terminology, and what they were assembling basically was incorrect based on what was in these tax prep documents. So that was actually well, in industry, I guess, is trending to offshore US labor resources to abroad. So I don't know if it's China or India, or apparently it's Brazil now, but this is one example of where that has backfired a little bit and they needed some help basically. But it is very interesting.
I could only imagine the Brazilians looking at our tax paperwork and being like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, all these foreign symbols and all these strange looking characters.
But after that, you quickly went to CDK and you worked on an AI powered inventory system. What did that look like, and kind of what type of insights did you get kind of working at CDK?
Yeah, of course. So at a high level, this is a potential vehicle repairs engine, basically. So a either customer or a sales representative could go into their dashboard, pop in a VIN, maybe a listing for a car, and get a very detailed report on anything that could potentially impact its resale value. So there is maybe a history of very poor reviews. There could be recalls for various parts. There could be history of maintenance invoices that show like, yeah, this engine needs constant work. It's costing several $1,000s. Yeah, basically all of this helps develop a profile to the sales associates, and then they can figure out if they're going to offer on a trade-in, how they might adjust the price, or if they're going to sell a new car or a used car, how that might influence the price. This is a full stack implementation. So on the front end, we had Vue. It's basically an AI-powered dashboard. On the back end, everything is ran by Node.js. And then we have a handful of models. Some are LLM, some are proprietarily built by the AI ML team. But it triangulates the associated vehicle data, creates some relations, and then spits it out in one easy to digest diagram and data dashboard with details and explanations. Very, very similar to like a ChatGPT, how if you were to ask it about a vehicle, it is actually very similar in nature. Of course, ChatGPT will not be nearly as precise or effective just because it doesn't have access to the various data sources that we do. But it is very, very similar to like a ChatGPT for cars, kind of. Yeah.
Was this a existing platform that you started to build AI functionality into, or kind of how did that look like?
So I was actually brought on board to do this for the first time. So
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty exciting. This is like one of the first major initiatives they had to overhaul their entire ecosystem with AI integration. So there's a lot of outdated or manual processes that a quick prompt to a API connected to a model could very, very easily do instead. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
What was one of the biggest takeaways you took on working on this, especially since it was the first time that they were trying to do anything like this, and you had to help them come on to help start developing this?
So the hallucinations that you mentioned earlier, they were pretty apparent at one point. Sometimes these AI models don't understand the difference between certain makes and models, and they don't understand the exact distinction between one trim level or the other, or maybe even between a SUV and a car. It's like they understand car, but they won't understand very specifically the unique differences between an SUV and a car or some of its features. So developing certain guardrails to protect the user from some of these hallucinations is a pretty big part of what we did. Creating a rule engine, definition engine, and then kind of a system for rating the model's response so that it could reflect and learn and understand why that association was wrong. So those guardrails are super important to preventing any hallucinations. Eventually, some of the difficult aspects of this is that as new vehicles are produced, as generations pass, you might still need to manually maintain some of these associations because the model still might not be able to keep up with it. But yeah, that will be interesting case in the future. But at least for what we have available to us in the short term, the guardrails are very effective.
It's really interesting to hear about that because it's something that you would, or normal person on a day to day would not think about.
Absolutely, very true.
And now you're out there on the market, you're looking, what kind of opportunities are of interest to you? What are you looking for next? What does that look like for you?
So ideally, something JavaScript, something Python related. In the last few years, I've had a very heavy AI integration focus. So yeah, something in that AI space. I'm not necessarily like data scientist or machine learning engineer, but yeah, something in the AI space, just to, I guess, get a piece of the pie of, what's trending and what is in demand would be really awesome. But yeah, that's primarily what I'm targeting.
And if you were joining a company tomorrow, what type of problems would excite you? Like, what would you want to try to be working on next?
I definitely get a really big satisfaction from improving or fixing something that was previously broken. It's one thing, to work on a new feature, but if you can solve a massive pain point, yeah, there's nothing more fulfilling from that because not only do you have the actual experience of it working better, but yeah, you're definitely celebrated for those type of things. Usually, those are things that are often overlooked or ignored. So yeah, they definitely stand out.
Yeah, I can appreciate that because nothing is better when somebody comes in and says, I just saved you 4 hours a week, right? And it might not seem
But
like
yeah,
a whole lot of time, right? But it's just like, that's a lot of time compounded over a year, right? And so I can complete.
definitely, yeah, absolutely.
And then geographically, I know we're kind of in this really weird world where it's like hybrid in person. Where are you looking to work? Are you looking for only remote roles? Kind of what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'm definitely targeting fully remote. I've been fully remote for probably like 99% of my career. I went to office a little bit um, at Cox initially when I started, but the pandemic hit almost immediately after. So it was kind of crazy. No, I love being remote. I love having the extra free time to go for a run or make a smoothie instead of commuting 40 minutes into an office. You really can't beat the quality of life improvement with being remote. That's for sure.
I can agree with you on that as well. So sometimes it's hard to think about going back every day in an office space.
Yeah, definitely.
And Roger, before we hang up and end this call, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up? Anything else you want to touch on?
I think that's it for the moment. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. This is very fun for me. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Roger, this was awesome. I appreciate you sharing. And if anybody is looking to get a hold of Roger, I will make sure to include his GitHub and his LinkedIn in the show notes so you can just click on it. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Offer Letter Candidate Spotlight.